to your day, to your afternoon, to your evening, wherever you are in this big wide world. We're going to be doing a little bit of a chat around nutrition here, and we're going to start this in 2 minutes. We're going to turn this episode into a podcast, and if you decide to watch this one on replay, please make sure that you hashtag replay in the comments. The reason we do that is because it gives us the signal of who's coming in, get us the information, and so we're able to keep track of that. So we're going to start this one in 2 minutes, guys. If you are coming into this one live, and by the way, I don't expect there'll be too many live because it's the middle of most Aussies' work days. And so to all of you who are got a cruisier day, or maybe you're on shift work, beautiful to have your company here with us. So good morning, Sean. How are you, legend? Lovely to have your company here, brother. Morning, champ. I can't see who that is. There's a link above that says Restream that you should be able to click. You should be able to click it where it says click here, and then it'll display your name. Guys, we're going to get this one started in literally 1 minute. How's the start to the morning been? I'm flat out work. Just ask me. Yeah, I can imagine. It's the way it is, hey? So good morning, Karina. Work from home life. How good's that? Work from home life is good, but can also be very tempting, especially if you've got a fridge full of goodies, which is always fun. Hello, Tez. What's going on, mate? Lovely to have your company. Obviously, you're not underground today. Hopefully not. It's Jace. Well, Jace, click the bloody Restream link, mate. All right, guys. I think we're just going to leap straight into this one. So what we'll do is... if there's anyone coming in here, particularly from the challenge, that wants to hang around at the end and ask any questions specifically that I haven't covered, then of course, please do that. Other than that, I think we are ready to rock and roll. So let's do it. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you come to when you're sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. Now, we're doing an episode right now off the back of the challenge that we are running, because we're getting a whole list of questions coming through from the some 150 challenges. Our Facebook group is absolutely exploding. Our client inbox is exploding. So it's pretty hard for us to stay on top of everything that's coming through at the moment, but that's all good. So what I thought I'd do is a bit of a podcast episode specifically around nutrition. And the reason I'm doing this episode is because whether you're a client or you're new in the challenge, I think it helps to maybe just recalibrate and give you a bit of insight into the way we think about nutrition, which is probably a little bit different to what a lot of people in the fitness industry do. And I can say that with confidence because of the fact that my personal background has come from being a university qualified dietitian, not the exercise side. The exercise side, I was always an exerciser, but it come later for me. So my real training is in the nutrition component, which is important because that's the most important bit, actually. One of the core tenets that we have in Better Body Academy is that you will never outrun your bad diet. And the example that I always use is if you take a Big Mac and you look at the calories in a Big Mac, you're looking at about 550 calories. For you to burn off 550 calories through routine exercise like walking, you're going to need to walk for about 4 or 5 hours to burn off that amount of calories. So you do the math. You can either not eat the Big Mac or you can do the 5 hours of walking. And this is one of the reasons why, depending on cardio, to try to burn off calories is not a very good idea. It doesn't work. This is also the reason why exercise plans that don't have a nutrition component have been shown time and time again to fail. This is also the reason why most personal trainers don't get a hell of a lot of result, is because their core offering is based around the training component. Without good addressing of the nutrition component, you're always going to be spinning the wheels. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about this whole nutrition thing and what really, in my opinion, our goal should be. How many of us watching live, I think there's about 15 people watching live, how many of us have now a really good relationship with food? And I'm guessing that if we're talking to a lot of our challenge folk, the answer is going to be the complete opposite. I've got a pretty shitty relationship with food, actually. And when I say shitty relationship, what I mean is I'm kind of in this bit of a, like whether it's acute or kind of chronic, it's like short-term binge bust cycle. And what I mean by that is we're kind of like, we're feeling crappy. So what we do is we say, you know what, I'm going on a diet. And so the way that we go about it is we restrict food, right? We restrict food volume. And then eventually we get to the point where we can't restrict food volume anymore because we're hungry. So what do? We binge and overreach. And then we overreach and we put on more weight. And then because we've overreached, we feel bad. So what do? We restrict again. And people continue this on for 10, 20, 30 years. So for me, this is a pretty broken relationship with food because you never actually get to truly enjoy the food. It almost feels like it's a bad relationship. You feel guilty if you have an ice cream and you feel really healthy if you're eating carrots. I just don't think about food like that. I think that a healthy approach to food involves indulgence at times. Rather than saying, let me give you the mindset shift that I think that you should be thinking about, is rather than saying, I can't have ice cream, you should be saying, how can I have ice cream? Because I like that. Rather than saying, I can't have beer, you should be saying, how can I factor in beer if I like having a beer? Does this make sense? One's a very liberated approach involving freedom. The other one is this approach which is naughty, like a naughty school child. And I just don't really think that that's ever going to last. So our main goal here is to have a great relationship with food where you're free from crazy restriction, but you are moving towards your health and fitness and particularly your weight management goals. Does that sound like a pretty good approach? And if you agree with that, I think that in order to make it sustainable, you need to get to a point where it is somewhat intuitive for you. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're always having to track your nutrition for the rest of your life, then that's laborious. It's gonna take time and effort all the time. What you want to get to is a point where you feel good about your food, you know what's roughly in your food, so you can make choices on the fly. Maybe you just read the occasional food label. You kind of know where to go in the grocery store. You can walk into any cafe in the world and feel like you can make a healthier choice. You can go out for dinner and not feel like, even though you're out to maybe a kind of a big Italian meal, that you don't have to go completely ham if you're having one of those periods of time where you're trying to maintain towards your goals. That's what liberation is. And so we need to get to that point of where we call it intuitive eating. So how do we get to the intuitive eating point? How do we get to the point where we can make better choices, where we know what's in our food? There's a process. If we go back to the old, you got to crawl before you walk idea, that same thing applies to your approach in nutrition. So what is the crawling before you walk? Well, firstly, I think if there's a step before crawling, it's like you're laying in your mother's womb, right? Or in a sack, you're getting carried around in the pouch at the front. You're the baby that's trying to learn nutrition. What's the equivalent of that? Following a meal plan where you don't have to think. You just get carried along. That was a weird analogy. But the point is, you don't want to have to think at the start. And all of you guys in our challenge currently, the best idea is that you just follow the meal plan. We can coach you a bit in how we put the meal plan together. This is what this video is about. But the goal is that you just get carried along. You don't have to think actively about it. Now, why is the meal plan good? Well, the meal plan is going to give you some structure. Here is the kind of big thing about the meal plan. I don't want you guys to be living by a meal plan for the rest of your life because that's not freedom. That's not intuitive. But it's necessary at the start because you're a baby when it comes to nutrition. Let's make sure that we understand that there's a difference between being an expert in food, as in I'm really good at eating all the food. I'm really good at eating all the cuisines. That's different to understanding nutrition. And most of us confuse the two. You're an expert in eating food and enjoying food, and that's great. But if you can become an expert in nutrition as well, then it's going to make your choices so much more sound. So you're the baby being carried around by mum or dad in the pouch. That's the meal plan. You just follow the meal plan for 4 to 5 to 6 weeks so that you get structure. Now, if you look at the way that we put together our meal plans, they're for a basic goal. Okay, they're for a basic goal, either to lose weight or gain muscle. The latter of these, we typically adjust the meal plan, obviously a little bit, but for the main part, they're the main goals, to either lose fat or gain muscle. And so there's 2 key things that we need to worry about when it comes to a meal plan. Let me tell you what those 2 things are. The total daily amount of calories and the total daily amount of protein. That's it. Okay, now you might say, well, what about fasting and what about calorie deficits and what? Okay, the 2 things that we need to get right are the daily protein and the daily calories. How we get those things right, the strategy of getting those things right, that's what fasting is. That's what supplementing with protein is. These are strategies to achieve it, but the things that we need to do to not confuse it are, we need to hit our protein target, we need to hit our calorie target. Why? Well, all fat is a stored form of petrol. Think of it almost like a stored form of food and drink on our body. So the only way that we're going to access that fat supply and get rid of it is that if we're reducing the amount of calories. Okay? So we have to enter what's called a calorie deficit. And that's why calories are important. Think of it almost like you're driving a car from Sydney to Brisbane. What you want to happen is you want to run out of petrol at about the Gold Coast. Okay? Then what's going to happen is that how do you get from Gold Coast to Brisbane if you've run out of petrol? Your body is going to go and break down its body fat supplies. That's what's going to happen. This is what's called a calorie deficit. It is an intentional running out of petrol, running out of calories, so that the only thing your body can do is go to the calories on your belly and your butt. Okay? So that's the first reason that we talk about calories and why that's important. The second thing is the protein component. Why is that important? Well, because if you're running out of petrol, you don't want your body to go, oh, okay, well then I can break down fat. I might as well break down some muscle as well. We don't want to do that. This is the reason why it's important to increase your protein intake. When you increase your protein intake, you say to the body, take my fat, not my muscle. If you pair that increase in protein with resistance training, you will stop the breakdown of muscle and you will mostly burn fat to make up for your calorie deficit. There's 17 people watching live. Can I just get like a little bit of a signal in the comments? Yep, understood, just that this makes sense so far. Because I'm trying to come at this as a non-complicated way. Okay, so what we've talked about here is that our first step is to give you a meal plan, whether you're a new client or whether you are in the challenge. We give you a meal plan to give you structure. This takes the thinking away for you. And it basically means that, yep, very clear, Jace, cool, thanks, Cara. So what we're doing is giving you the meal plan and saying, follow that, be the baby in the pouch, just follow that from now on. But eventually what's going to happen is, unless you want to be the baby in the pouch for the rest of your life, you need to learn how to develop your own meal plan or to conduct your own eating style. So the second phase in our approach after having the structure of a meal plan is to move on to a tracking approach, okay? We call this the freedom eating formula. And what it basically means is that you can eat whatever you want. You could ask me the question, is this good, is this bad? I don't care. The only thing I care about is that you're hitting the protein target that we give you and the calorie target that we give you. How you get there, we don't care. It actually doesn't matter. What matters is that you hit it. And how do you know that you're hitting it? Well, the only way to know that is if you're tracking it. And so you've got to learn the skills of tracking with MyFitnessPal, and being able to read food labels so that you can look at a product and go, okay, so this protein bar here, I know that if I put this protein bar in my mouth, it's going to be 200 calories and 20 grams of protein. That's a good choice. If I put this beer in my mouth, it's going to be 150 calories and no protein. Okay, that's not a problem. Could I look for a lower calorie beer? That's a good idea. And then I find a beer and I discover that this certain beer is 90 calories and I go, well, hang on, there's two beers there. If I just choose the one with the lower calories, that's going to be better for me sticking to my freedom eating formula. In other words, my calorie and protein target. So that's the way we want to think about this. We want to think about this as stage 1, meal plan. Stage 2, a period of tracking. And then you might ask, how long do I need to track for? Well, the answer to that is until you get to a point where you know what you're doing. Until you get to a point where you can then stop tracking and you can start going off and just intuitively eating, the final step in the transition. But before you get there, you have to know what you're putting in. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to keep stepping on the scales or doing your waist circumference measurements or your photos. And you're going to be frustrated about the fact that you're not changing. And you're going to say things like, listen up. You're going to say things like, I'm in a calorie deficit, but I'm not losing weight. Has anyone ever had that feeling? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not in a calorie deficit. I'm in a calorie deficit, but I'm not losing weight. That exact statement is a contradiction because over a long enough period of time, it's impossible. You can't be in a calorie deficit and not losing weight. People misunderstand the difficulty of weight loss, and it's not because you are somehow an anomaly to science. Your body just operates different to the rest of the world. That's not what it is. It's that what you think you're doing is different to what is actually happening. If your body is losing fat, that is telling you you are in a calorie deficit, even if you think you are eating too much. If over the long term your body is not losing fat, this is an indication that you are not in a calorie deficit, even if you think you are. So the body is the instrument. The body tells us the feedback about what's going on. And so how long do you need to track for? Well, you track using MyFitnessPal until you get to a point where you roughly know what's going on. And I can tell you as a person that's been doing this for a long time, after a period of intuitive eating, you'll slowly slide. And that's not a problem because we always underestimate the calories that we're consuming. So what happens is you might be intuitively eating for a couple of years, you might put on a couple of kilos, but then you'd go back to step 2, using MyFitnessPal, tracking, reading food labels to recalibrate and remind yourself that perhaps you've kind of lost touch with actually what's in the food. So tracking is this kind of middle tool that will always be there. Now, is it fun? No. Tracking sucks. But what sucks more is that when you look in the mirror and you don't like your body, that sucks heaps more than tracking. There are ways to make tracking way more efficient, way more effective, way more enjoyable, and way more easy. And if you're in Better Body Academy, we teach you those things, especially if you go through the guides. And we've got someone saying, oh my God, this is me all the time. Yeah. So it's not a problem that you're sliding a little bit on the intuitive eating front, but what you need to do is once you have the skills of tracking, you need to come back to the tracking every now and then to remind yourself. And I'll give you an example of the proof of this and how I know that this is the struggle is that even for myself, that I dare say I probably understand more than anyone in this entire community about nutrition having a degree in it. Even still, about a year ago, I went back to tracking my own nutrition and realized I was underestimating by about 500 calories a day compared to what I thought I was consuming. 500 calories a day. So if I'm underestimating by about 500 calories a day, what does that say about the majority of people? we're probably underestimating by a substantial amount. If you take 500 calories a day and add that up over the course of a week, that's 3,500 calories, which just happens to be the amount of fat contained amount of calories contained in a pound of fat. So I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but if you're slowly gaining weight, say a pound a week, how does that accumulate? Well, you only need to overeat by about 500 calories a week and you'll gain a pound of fat. Sorry, 500 calories a day and you'll gain a pound of fat per week. All right, so that's how it can slide quickly. And this is why, understanding nutrition is the most potent thing. All right, so I want to talk about our meal plan specifically. And there's been a few questions that have come through regarding our meal plan and how to think about this. The first one I want to talk about is fasting. The role of fasting. I'm just going to let everyone know who is currently in the challenge and is a client, there is no magic in fasting. The only way fasting works is you normally have this much time to eat your food. So you have X amount of food. When you reduce it to this much amount of time, you shrink the window and you eat less food. Total calories. That's how fasting works. It's just a shrinking of the eating window. Don't worry about all this garbage you hear about the hormones and blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about that. What happens if I break my fast? Nothing. The calories just count. That's all. Can you have coffee in your fasting? Sure. You can do anything you want. The only thing that we're trying to do here is, in the meal plan initially, we know that if we give you a slightly reduced eating window, it'll make it easier for you to manage inside of that eating window. Now, I think fasting is particularly important, or particularly effective, I should say, for men who are getting up early. And I know that sounds a bit sexist, but I'm not meaning it to be. I'm saying typically men getting up and maybe they're going to the gym, maybe they're kind of doing that before work, and then they're at work by 5:30, 6 o'clock. It's almost like the last thing they want to think about is eating a healthy breakfast if it's just too much. So what we do is we say, well, why don't you just fast and keep your calories for the rest of the day, meaning that you could eat more at the other meals. And that's how fasting works. So to any of you that are asking about fasting, particularly women who are thinking, it feels like a lot of food to eat on this meal plan in that condensed eating window, guess what? Just don't fast. It doesn't matter. This is explained in the meal plan document that we gave you, but if you skip the reading of it, just understand that fasting's not magic. And if you want to, you can spread the food over the entire 24 hours of a day if you want. Move some food from the end of the meal plan to the start of the meal plan. It doesn't matter. Fasting is just one tool. The second thing that I want you to know about the meal plan is that we've tried to eliminate a lot of processed foods, with the exception of some snacks. The reason that that works is because when you eliminate processed foods, you increase the amount of protein and fiber. Think about non-processed foods: a steak, chicken, fish, vegetables, unprocessed carbohydrates. These foods are all very filling. The reason they're filling is because they're high in fiber and protein, the two things that fill you up. And so with this in mind, if we just make one change to our eating and don't ever even track any nutritional calories at all, if the one change that we make to our eating is that we stop eating processed foods, we will lose weight. Fact. The best change that you can make with your family is to stop eating processed foods. If you do that, you will win. You will lose weight and you will maintain weight. The second most potent change is the elimination of calorie-filled beverages. Now, when I say that, everyone says alcohol. No, I don't just mean alcohol. Alcohol is the one we think of because it's the one that we tend to binge out the most. But what I'm really saying is that there is no real reason to be consuming, realistically, there's no real reason to be consuming any beverages with calories in them when there's another option. So as an example, if you're having full cream Coke, full sugar Coke, just move to the diet version, right? If you're having Fanta and different soft drinks, we'll just move to the naturally flavored mineral water. If you are having full cream milk, just eliminate the calories and just have skim milk instead. Now, yes, there's some calories in skim milk, but you're just cutting the calories out. And if you're having beers that contain 150, 200 calories per beer, when there's beers on the market that are 4%, they're 90 calories. Why consume the full calorie version if your weight is a concern for you? Just make that simple change. It's extremely simple. Juices. Well, people are like, oh, juices are really great. I've got to do a juice detox. No, you don't. Would anyone here listening to this podcast, either live or on the player on replay, would anyone here ever actually eat 6 oranges in a row? No. If you were to enjoy a beautiful piece of fruit, have an orange, great, you'd eat 1 orange. But it's when you take 6 oranges and chop them up and put them into a juice, that's the equivalent of having 6 oranges, whether you eat it or you drink it. This is why juice is not a great option from a calorie perspective. It's not that you can't have juice. It's not that fruit is bad, which is the conclusion that people make. It's not. It's just that you would never sit down and have 6 oranges in one go, no less than you'd have 6 bananas or 6 pineapples in one go. You just wouldn't do that. So this is where choosing the most unprocessed option is going to be the best, and choosing the beverages like, instant coffee or long blacks on skim milk, teas, diet sodas, naturally sweetened ones, of course water, these types of things, bubbly, there's no problems because they just don't contain any calories. The final point that I want to make here is around healthy eating is really simple, actually. So when people say, oh, you know what, one of the struggles that I have is that I can't cook very well. That is the biggest, that's the biggest mystery I think that people have when it comes to eating for weight management. They think I can't cook properly because they've watched MasterChef or something to that effect, and it overwhelms them. I'm not the greatest chef either, but what I can do is grab some microwave rice and put that in the microwave for a minute. I can grab a steak, a piece of chicken, a piece of fish. I can look at it and go, well, that steak has a lot of visible fat on it. I might just cut that off and then just put some spray oil on it and then a bunch of herbs and seasonings, and I might just stick that on the barbecue. And you know what I can go and do? I can go and get that packed salad over there, and I can just pour it on a plate, whack some cherry tomatoes and some avocado in it. I'm not going to use all that mayonnaise that comes with it. I'm just going to use some lemon juice and sweeten it up with some soy sauce or something like that. That meal takes me literally less than 10 minutes to cook. And of that 10 minutes, it's me waiting for the steak to be done or the fish to be done. That's it. It's meant to be simple. And we complicate this thing by making it like, oh, I don't know how to make a healthy lasagna. Well, in itself, the reason that that's a challenge is because you're not eating around a whole food approach. Can you make a healthy lasagna? Of course you can. Or a low-calorie lasagna? Yes, of course you can. But it's going to require more effort. Do that on the weekends when you've got time. But in terms of when you're just trying to manage your weight through the week, you've got to drop the kids, you've got to go to work, you've got to do all the things and you're exhausted already, you're going to make better choices if the choices are easier to make. And probably the best and most simplest thing you can do is this: a piece of meat of some type, a carbohydrate of some type, corn, pasta, rice, potato, it doesn't matter. And then the third thing is some sort of vegetable scenario. If you do that and just do that on repeat, you'll be fine. Does this make sense, guys? So hopefully this has helped. Now, I guess what I wanted to say is that if you follow this approach, which we call the freedom eating formula, and there's little kind of discrepancies within this, which are, you might like me to eat the same thing every day. And if you love eating the same thing every day, then eat the same thing every day. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. What I do is pretty much eat the same breakfast, snacks, lunch, and I just vary the dinner. And each dinner that I have is basically just a different type of meat with the same thing. Now, that said, I love routine. At least half of the people that listen or watch this podcast are going to say, that sounds like the most boring thing in the world. That's not a problem. Vary what you do every day. But in order to vary what you do every day, and still manage your weight, you have to understand tracking so that you know what you're putting in. Because if you're just trying to eat intuitively, that's the equivalent of being born and then starting to walk. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. You have to go through the process of following a meal plan first, learning tracking, learn to understand what's in food until you go, you know what? I now understand what's in food. I can control this and I'm all over this. Now, this is before we talk about the emotional component of stress eating and boredom eating and all of that sort of stuff, which is a completely different topic. But in terms of the basics of nutrition, this is the way to nail it. We keep it simple. We go through these three phases of meal plan, tracking, intuition. And if you don't try to run before you've been carried, then you will win over the long term. This has been the Better Body Academy podcast. Coming back to you with a Nutrition 101. Hopefully this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments if this has been helpful. And if you do want to jump on to the podcast player and give us a review, I would appreciate that more than you know. You just go to Apple or Spotify, search up Better Body Academy podcast and leave us a review. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Okay, so team, that's the podcast finished. Was that helpful? There's 15 people watching live. Was that helpful? I'm just going to read a couple of comments here. I'm new to tracking, and I can't see who this is, so let us know who this is. Finding it a bit difficult. I have heard we have to restrict carbs. So when I'm picking anything, I'm looking for stuff which is less in carbs. Is this the right approach? No, it's not the right approach. Straight away, I can't see who this is, sorry. So you've got to click the Restream link above where it says click here. If it's not there, I don't know what's going on. But no, remember I said at the start, if you were here for the start of the podcast, the only two things you need to look at are the total calories and the total protein. Now, let me explain the reason why. Is because the way that you get to the total calories is going to include the sum of three things: the amount of fat, the amount of protein, and the amount of carbohydrates. Okay? So it's not that looking or paying attention to carbohydrates is wrong. It's an unnecessary strategy. What we're better to do is just simplify things, remove the word macros. Everyone talks about macros, but they don't even know what a macro is. So why not just talk in specifics? Let's talk about two things. Let's talk about total daily calories and total protein. Now, to your question, you've said, so when I'm picking anything, am I looking for stuff which is less in carbs? Well, naturally, if you're prioritizing protein first, what will happen is that you'll naturally crowd out a lot of the processed carbs in your diet. So by prioritizing protein and by choosing, it's a great question, by choosing foods which are less processed, right, you're going to naturally crowd out the carbohydrates in your diet, but you don't need to look at it. The second point that I want to make on this question is that rather than thinking about specific foods, worry about the total day. So if you're tracking and you have something that's extremely high in carbs, as an example, let's say you have a massive bowl of pasta, what you want to do is you want to put it into MyFitnessPal. And rather than looking at the carbs, you want to look at the total calories. And hey, Addy, good, man, you did the thing for us, so that's perfect. So let's say that you put it into MyFitnessPal and you saw that was just the pasta alone was 800 calories because it was a massive bowl. Well, then you want to ask yourself, okay, is 800 calories a good use of my calories given that there's no real protein in part? Like, it's a tiny bit, but is that a good use? What you're going to find, let's just pretend it was the first thing you ate in your day, Addy. We want to hit about 2,000 calories a day as a client, right? So what's going to happen is 800 of them as an example. I know you're not eating that much pasta. I'm just making the point. Let's say you eat 800 calories worth of pasta. That effectively means you got roughly 1,200 calories to now hit the other 200 grams of protein that you haven't hit. So it's not that carbs are bad. It's that carbs are probably from a perspective of, they're probably the least important. And when you're looking to lose weight, they are the macronutrient out of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Carbohydrate's the one that's most dispensable. That doesn't make them bad. What the great bit is that carbohydrates taste good. So once we get you to your weight goal, Addy, the idea would be we're going to start to increase calories back up again. That's where we can introduce more calories, and typically those calories come back in the way of carbohydrate. Meaning you can eat more meat pies and pizza, if that makes sense. So I don't want to dodge the question anyway. What I want to clarify, brother, is that in terms of tracking, watch video 5 and 6 inside your app. Watching video 5, the Freedom Eating Formula video, will teach you exactly the numbers you want to be thinking about and how to go about it. And then video 6 is going to teach you how to track, how to read food labels. Okay? You put the two together, you've got the perfect strategy. And okay, so I'm just going to have a look here. For example, I was going to buy rice cakes. I looked, it was 4 grams of protein and 20 grams plus of carbohydrate, so I'll put it back on the shelf. Okay, so what I would instead do, I love rice cakes, by the way. So what I would instead do is this, Addy. I'm going to think about how is this meal going to help me to achieve my total goals for the day. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go, okay, can you remember offhand, does anyone happen to have access to this? I don't have it on me at the moment. But what is a single rice cake in terms of total calories? Like a single rice cake, I'm guessing is like 70 calories maybe. So for me, what I'm thinking is I'm not looking at the carbohydrate. I'm looking at, okay, I can have these 4 rice cakes and maybe have them with like peanut butter or something like that. It's not really going to help me get towards my protein goal. So what I'm thinking about doing is how can I have, say, 4 rice cakes? This is a staple meal for me. 4 rice cakes, a shitload of low-fat cottage cheese, and then I'll take my John West tuna and I'll keep the lid on, open it up, keep the lid on, squeeze the lid down so it pushes out all the oil, tip it in the sink. I'm removing all those calories. So pretty much what I've got is like almost pure protein left from the tuna, and I'm topping my rice cakes with cottage cheese with the protein. Now, that meal then becomes, 500 or 600 calories total. Here we go. Carly's saying 4 rice cakes is 92 calories. So Addy, that's nothing. I would have thought it was more than that, but that's nothing. So 4 rice cakes, 92 calories. We add on, say, a big clump of cottage cheese, low-fat cottage cheese. That's another 100 calories plus 6 or 7 grams of protein. Then we add a can of tuna. Now we've got basically a 400 to 500 calorie meal with about probably 20 to 30 grams of protein. That's a good meal. That's a really good meal. Does this make sense? Just let me know if that makes sense, brother. Okay, I'm a qualified chef and I'm loving this meal plan. I'm actually eating it because I'm actually eating. This is the point. It shouldn't be about starving yourself. Okay? Is there any other questions, guys, while we're here before we do this, do the end to this live? That makes sense, Addy. Good stuff. And thanks for the help there, Carls. Anyone else want to ask anything? Still 10 or so people watching on live, so I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you want to sling them through, specific to nutrition. Carly, I think I answered the questions on fasting. It's not magic, guys. Just do it or don't do it. Doesn't matter. I think that's it. Cool. All right, guys. I hope it's helpful. I'll speak to you soon. Peace.